Hey everyone, it's Eddie Kalegi reminding you that each and every episode of Sports Speak is powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a one-stop shop for tickets to concerts, sporting events, and so much more. And now you can use the promo code SportsSpeak on the site to get $20 off your first purchase. So what are you waiting for? SeatGeek. Let there be live. And now on to the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 140 of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Rahill Jaiswal is going to be joining us in a few minutes for all things NBA. The draft complete, free agency just a couple of days away. We'll dive into it all. But the big story, we're recording this on Thursday morning. Last night, perfection in Oakland, the 24th perfect game in Major League Baseball history, the first in 11 years. And it came from someone I don't think anybody expected to throw a perfect game, especially based on his last two starts. Domingo German of the New York Yankees, 27 up, 27 down. Now, throwing a perfect game against the Oakland Athletics, I don't think is a big surprise, but with the way German has struggled at times this season, he has looked good. He's had starts where he goes 7-8 innings, and then other times, he'd allowed 15 runs in 5 1/3 over his previous two starts, and now perfect game. It's just so weird when you look at the perfect game stats to me, Tim, because you've got Philip Umber, Dallas Braden. It's only happened 24 times. I believe only 6 of the pitchers that have thrown perfect games are in the Hall of Fame. Sometimes it's kind of random pitchers who get it done and just have a magical night, and that's exactly what happened for Domingo German, who gives the Yankees a much-needed spark going forwards, and most importantly for him, adds him to an elite list into the history books.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And, I think I said it on the show before the season started about what I felt the positivity of the pitch clock created. And I said it multiple times. I said, I feel like this change is either a positive or negative for pitchers in regards to, I feel like when you have your stuff, the era of the perfect game is going to come back because this game creates energy and flow. And yesterday, Domingo German was electric from start to finish. Of course, he goes on, throws baseballs, 24th perfect game in history, the fourth perfect game in New York Yankees history. But when you look at 20 of his 27 outs yesterday, and actually I may be underestimating. It actually may have been like 22, 23 of his 27. But what Domingo German did better than anybody yesterday in baseball was he threw an overly effective curveball, effectively throwing it for strikes. I mean, he had the big moment. I think it was back in the fifth inning where he had that 3-1 count and he ends up turning around. That curveball ended up being the big changer. His changeup as well was on point. But for Domingo German, I mean, let's talk about it in this regard. To go from the lowest to low the last two starts, people hoping that he gets DFA'd, doesn't think he can make this Yankees rotation, to turn around and throw a perfect game is absolutely remarkable. And I'm just glad that to be honest with you, I never thought the New York Yankees would be the team that would break the perfect game streak, just because historically speaking, no Yankees pitcher outside of maybe CC Sabathia has had that kind of dominant stuff in a given outing. Listen, Garrett Cole's spectacular. Don't get me wrong. In my debate, probably the Cy Young favorite this year. But Garrett Cole isn't a perfect game type of pitcher. He is a guy that just comes out as lights out stuff, but he'll allow a hit in there. Domingo German, when you think about it, oh God, I want to say before the domestic abuse situation that left him suspended, you have to remember this was the guy we were talking about leading the Yankees ball club along Luis Severino. And he has it, but how does he turn it around? And I'm excited to see how he builds off of this confidence wise, because there's nothing better than this. But overall, I mean, I'll say one last thing in this regards to the aspect of the perfect game, Eddie. I remember where I was in 2012 when Felix Hernandez threw his last perfect game in the baseball's last perfect game prior to last night. I was on vacation in Lake George in George's Steakhouse, getting to watch it with friends on the TV, with not a lot of service, but got to see it on television. I'll be pretty much in my living room last night watching the Yankees face the worst team in baseball, so perfect game, which is it's fitting. But I feel bad for the Oakland fans. I'll say this, not to demean them a little bit, but think about it like this: if that's your last big moment in Oakland, that stinks.
You
I'm
got
not gonna lie.
something, but you got
I mean,
something to cheer
it's
for. At least it was something. Those A's fans were going crazy. I mean, they got to
yeah,
see some
no,
history.
absolutely. But it's like that's like with everything to sell the A's, sell the team. If that's the last historic moment that happens in Oakland Coliseum, that stinks. I would want it to end on a positive note. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but they've really embraced it. The reverse boycott worked. I was at Citi Field the other night. First guy we see getting off the train, he's wearing an Oakland A's sell shirt and an Oakland A's hat. So it's spread across the country. So, but yeah, perfection, 24th perfect game ever for Domingo German. Should be 25. I really wish they'd just overturn Armando Galarragas at some point and give him that perfect game
Yeah.
he deserves.
Well, I would consider that a perfect game plus at the end of the day. I know you can't like change it historically speaking, but you got 28 outs,
Yeah.
straight up 28 outs. So it's like it should be considered a perfect game plus in my opinion. But for the record, perfect game. This is the highest, the high for the Yankees, but I don't want to ignore the fact you lost to the A's the day before. So I still feel the same exact thing I do about this team. Not exactly as much about Domingo German at the moment. That could change as the season goes on, but the Yankees need to turn it around. I was getting ready to write a segment. Not to jump to the Yankees, but it stuns me at this point in the season. We're getting towards halfway, getting towards All-Star break. If you would have told me only one of the final four teams in Major League Baseball last postseason are in a playoff spot, and that's barely the New York Yankees for the third wild card spot, and the Astros are about a game and a half behind right now, especially with them being the defending World Series champions, would have stunned me. And the fact that you have the Phillies behind, the Braves and the Marlins in the East out of the playoff spot. And I mean, the Padres. The Padres have done everything possibly right this offseason, got better bats. Their bullpen and rotation, arguably, in my opinion, the best in baseball, statistically speaking. But this team still can't win games. They're below 500. And it all stems from the fact that, listen, Juan Soto is having a decent season, but it doesn't, it's much different compared to when he got there last season. But you have guys like Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, who had that great hot start. They've gone cold. The Padres simply, just like the Yankees, can't hit. And it goes to the point of, I just look at this season. It's unique. Obviously, you get the perfect game back now, but it's unique because I can't recall a season where the top teams in Major League Baseball the season prior are barely competing for a playoff spot. In this case, three-fourths of them in the moment are going to miss the playoffs the following season without really, I mean, yeah, I guess the Astros had the most drastic change of losing their Cy Young pitcher, but that really shouldn't take apart the entirety of what Houston has done over the last 6 seasons, pretty much. So I just think it's relatively interesting that we're getting to this point, and I just wonder what the Yankees are going to do to turn it around. Because right now, nobody offensively, except for last night where they score 11 runs, is the answer. But I can't stand Giancarlo Stanton bad Mendoza line numbers. And also, by the way, one more thing not related to the Yankees, but I'd never really noticed how bad of a season Kyle Schwarber was having in Philadelphia. He is literally putting up Chris Davis numbers this season.
Yeah, he hits 160, but he hits bombs. That's all he does. His only on base things are home runs, pretty much. It's
I,
crazy.
I can't believe, and that's somebody again that people wanted to be a Yankee.
Mhm.
And it's like it just stuns me. Like that is literally Chris Davis numbers to a T. And he leads baseball in strikeouts. He's on track for I think it's 230 strikeouts this
Yep.
season.
Yep, it's unbelievable, and it's been a crazy year in baseball indeed. And once we get closer to the All-Star break, we'll analyze it a little more as we get closer to the deadline. But stay tuned for part 2 of Sports Speak here, as Rahill Jaiswal will join us to talk all things NBA. Episode 140 here of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi, Rahill Jaiswal joining me now. If you missed our first segment, YouTube users, of course, it's together. Spotify, we're only posting this one. If you want to get the YouTube exclusive Tim Moore's reaction to Domingo German's perfect game, go to YouTube. But if you're watching on YouTube right now, You already heard that. And now we're transitioning to the NBA. So the draft just happened. We're recording this Thursday afternoon. Free agency officially kicks off in about 30 hours. So we're getting close. And obviously, usually those first 6 hours, there are already deals that are set that just get announced right after 6. So things are going to happen. And of course, things have already happened in terms of the trade market. Chris Paul is a Warrior. Kristaps Porzingis is a Celtic. We'll talk about that. Let's start with the draft, though, Rahill. And let's just start with the number one guy, Victor Wembanyama to the San Antonio Spurs. They've had a pipeline of developing big-time big men. Tim Duncan, David Robinson. We'll see if Victor Wembanyama lives up to the hype. Of course, he's sort of a unicorn. He's 7'3". He can handle the ball. He's quick. He can shoot threes. Not a lot of body to him, though, so I'm curious to see how he really handles some of these NBA centers. What are your expectations for Victor as a rookie with the Spurs, who don't really have much else around him right now?
I mean, I'd say I expect to have the solid season, nothing crazy. Like you said, he's a rookie, so first-year adjustment. Now, it all depends on health, Eddie. Can this guy stay healthy? Because we've seen guys who are 7'3", are kind of like unicorns, but the big issue is their health. And you talk about with his lack of size, we saw what happened to Chet Holmgren. First time he goes up against LeBron, takes a little contact, he gets injured. So I expect him to beef up a little bit for the start of the season. But something also to keep in mind is he's already playing grown men in France. That's kind of what people sometimes tend to forget about European basketball, is the transition for them isn't as difficult as a college player because they're already going up against grown men. Now, how is he going to fare? I think he'll have a solid season, but to me, Eddie, it all depends on his health. I mean, if he can stay healthy, this guy possibly could be one of the best players we've ever seen. Because we've never seen a guy with his skill set, his ability to shoot, rebound, assist, and his quickness at his height. He's a better version. Take Kristaps Porzingis, but take a better shooting ability, an ability to handle the basketball, an ability to play good defense and get rebounds, something Porzingis doesn't really play down low. So that's what you could be getting in Wembanyama. And you talk about going to a great organization, the Spurs, who obviously haven't had anything much recently. They did the DeMar DeRozan trade, but since then, nothing really at all. But you've got one of the best coaches in Greg Popovich. They know how to develop talent, as you said. Think about the guys that have come out of there. Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, even Kawhi Leonard. He was drafted there. They developed all those guys. Tony Parker wasn't extremely high praise, so they know how to develop guys. So I expect a good season from Victor Wembanyama.
Now, Wembanyama, of course, the class of the draft, but some solid talents as well. I was a little surprised the Hornets went with Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson at 2. I view Scoot Henderson beyond Wembanyama as the best player in the draft. I'm wondering if you feel the same way.
I wouldn't say – I'd still take Victor Wembanyama, but I was also very surprised that Scoot Henderson did not go over number 2. I thought he'd be the lock to go number 2. That's another interesting decision by the Hornets and everything with Michael Jordan trying to sell the team and all that stuff. But also kind of surprised that Portland did not trade their pick. I would think that with everything that's come out about Damian Lillard trading, if they wanted to try and keep him, I was maybe expecting for them to throw that in a package, make a deal on the day of the draft and try and get another player to pair with Dame. But it looks like they're gonna try, because Damian Lillard, he has every right to be annoyed because he doesn't want to be waiting for these guys to develop. So we're gonna see what happens with that as well.
Now let's talk about some of the underrated picks. My two that really jump out to me were back-to-back in the second round. I like the way Brooklyn drafted. I have confidence. I don't have confidence in Sean Marks and Joe Sion a lot, but the way they draft, I do, because they've kind of gone diamond in the rough with Nick Claxton and Cam Thomas as some later picks over the last couple of years. And Jalen Wilson for most of the year was leading the country in college basketball in scoring, and they steal him at 49 to go along with Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead. So a solid draft for Brooklyn, who are in sort of a rebuilding situation, still have to figure out what they're going to do with Ben Simmons. And then right after that, I love the story with Keontae Johnson after what happened to him at Florida, and now great year at Kansas State with Jerome Tang. He goes to Oklahoma City, who are loaded with young talent, well ahead of schedule with how well they played last year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is becoming a star. Josh Giddey is great too. What are some moves in this draft? I mentioned two there that you see as kind of underrated, but really good for the teams that pick them up.
the Keontae Johnson deal, as you just said. And the main reason is, look at Oklahoma City's draft record in total. They drafted and developed James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Russell Westbrook. 3 MVPs, 3 straight years. No one's ever done that before. I think that's a great move. I'm very high on Oklahoma City just because of the sheer talent you had. I think I personally love Josh Giddey. I'm a huge Shai Gilgeous-Alexander fan. So now you add Keontae Johnson to that young mix, keep growing, and they've still got a bunch of draft picks to work with in the future. Maybe they can package those, try and get a good, solid role player, veteran that gives some nice experience to them. Because as you said, they're way ahead of schedule. They almost made the play-in game. So they're way ahead of schedule. So I really like that move for them.
I also like the Raptors getting Grady Dick. Now, first of all, frat boys at colleges across the country, that is going to become the #1 worn jersey, the Grady Dick Toronto Raptors jersey. Already Drake's posting about him, but I think Toronto is building something there with some young talent. They are one of these teams that's going to have a lot of questions coming into free agency and potential trades, and that's where we'll transition. Let's start with the 2 trades that happened before the draft. We talked about it a little with Tristan last week about Chris Paul going to Golden State. I think me and Tim actually broke the news to you in our group chat that trade had happened, but Chris Paul goes to the Warriors. Jordan Poole's heading to Washington. My real question here is, if Golden State keeps Draymond Green, which I think they will, what the strategy will be. Because to me, I'd like to see Chris Paul off the bench, because I think you can have him elevate the second unit and also keep him healthier and more fresh for the playoffs, where he's run out of steam and gotten hurt 2 of the last 3 years. I think that could really help them out. And I personally don't like seeing Draymond Green at the 5. But with Chris Paul on the court, it kind of changes the way they play, because Steph Curry was the ball handler and the shooter. Now Steph Curry's going to be playing off ball, kind of like Clay, if Chris Paul's out there with him. So how well do you think this is going to balance? And do you think the Warriors are making their roster too old potentially?
I think they'll be fine. I think the Chris Paul move was, they were so desperate to get rid of Jordan Poole's contract. If we're being completely honest, they've cleared almost $40 million in cap. Now they got to still, if they want to restructure Wiggins' deal and all that stuff. You talk about Draymond's probably going to get the extension. Klay Thompson still got a huge deal. But the thing with Chris Paul is, to me, you can kind of pluck him into any sort of offense and he'll give it flow. Now, I understand what you're saying with Steph Curry. Normally I'd be concerned, but if there's one point guard that can play off the ball, it's Steph Curry. You look at his off-ball movement, the amount of backdoor cuts he uses, just he knows how to play off-ball because he just got such smart IQ. So that's not the issue. Now, obviously the big issue is Chris Paul's health. So bringing him off the bench would actually be a smart suggestion, kind of savor his minutes and still get him important minutes so Steph Curry can get some rest. Because remember, what was Golden State's issue? It's turnovers and over-reliance on Steph Curry. As now, obviously, Chris Paul, he's at the latter stage of his career. He might not be able to score the basketball as he used to, but he can still get you buckets. He can still knock down. That mid-range is still deadly. And also, he can help you. He can give you another guy you can trust to bring the ball up and limit the turnovers. Golden State was turning the ball over 20 times a game, which ended up really costing him the playoffs. So if you can get someone like Chris Paul to handle the basketball more, just to give him a guy who's got a better handle on the basketball, that can really help him. But I don't really have any problems or see any issues with them coexisting. The biggest question, obviously, is, can Chris Paul just stay healthy? Because, one wrong thing happens, he pulls a groin, he's got a hamstring. So it's just, you just got to hope he stays healthy.
And I mean, that's the question for almost all of these moves. I mean, the Suns, we talked about it so much last week with Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, both very injury prone over the last few years. We'll see how that works out. The other trade that happened that we didn't get to cover last week, because it happened just after we posted, was the trade that fell through initially. Then they found a third team. Marcus Smart is gone from Boston, which caught him by a surprise and caught pretty much everyone by a surprise. But they bring in Kristaps Porzingis. And I still like KP. He's 7'3". He can give you good minutes. He can shoot the 3 ball. He can drive to the hoop. He's still a very unique talent in this league. And I think the fact that Robert Williams is a true traditional center, not someone who's really going to stretch out, he's someone who's going to mix it up down low, allows Porzingis to play even better, where in Washington a lot of times he had to play the center, the true center spot for the last year and a half, and even for Dallas for an extent as well. And now he gets to thrive as a 4 potentially. And to me, losing Marcus Smart for the Celtics isn't too costly, because Derek White was a hero, and I think he's going to be back. Now, there's apparently injuries with concerns about a Brogdon injury, but He's the best free throw shooter in the league, and he's one of the best 3-point shooters. He's good. And I think Peyton Pritchard is promising as well. So while losing Marcus Smart defensively could hurt Boston, I think adding Porzingis, I think it was a worthy sacrifice, and I think Boston's going to be just fine.
I think Boston will be fine. Porzingis actually played pretty well in Washington. If you look at his numbers, considering he wasn't really working with much. But, like you said, Porzingis, I have mixed feelings about Porzingis, obviously, because as you know, I'm a Knicks fan. But the big issue with always him was, yes, you're 7'3" and you can shoot, but there are times where just wandering along the 3-point line, it's just not good enough. He's not the type of guy to get down low and play physical. But as you said, Boston's got a ton of physical guys. They've got Robert Williams down there. He can play big. So now Porzingis doesn't have to take that. Now, the issue with Boston is, yes, he's a great shooter, but you really relied on the 3-point shooting in the postseason. You see what happened in that Game 7. So I'm just kind of thinking how they're going to manage this out. But the main thing Boston needs is they need a true ball handler. Jason Tatum is not a ball handler. You see Jaylen Brown. He cannot handle the basketball. Marcus Smart was sort of their fill-in kind of point guard, but we all know Marcus Smart is not a point guard at nature. So they need to find someone that can handle the basketball consistently. Brogdon can do it off the bench, and maybe he can start a few games. But as you said, Brogdon has also had a ton of injury concerns in the past, so you might not want to put him in the starting lineup. So that's what they really need. They really need someone that can handle the basketball well and give them flow. Smart actually did a good job of morphing into that role, but you just know that's not his natural thing. So they need to find someone who can do that naturally.
And on the other side of that deal, I think the Grizzlies really lucked out. You essentially replaced Dillon Brooks with Marcus Smart, who is just a better version of Dillon Brooks. He's more controlled on the court, and he's a much better defender, and he's more productive offensively. You give up Tyus Jones. He was pretty much Jaws fill-in, and Marcus Smart, as you said, he could at least handle the ball. So when Morant is out for the 25 games at the beginning of the season, Smart can slot in as the starting point guard without Morant. So I think the Grizzlies made a good move, and I think Marcus Smart is a great locker room presence there. But yeah, shocking to see him leave Boston, and I guess the hair is going to go from green to navy blue. I don't know. He's gonna have to change the hair color. No longer with the Celtics. But let's go to some future predictions here. So as we said, we're recording this Thursday afternoon. Free agency starts in about a day's time, and the number one story to me is what's going to happen with Kyrie Irving. So he went to Dallas. The Mavericks fall from a 4 seed to missing the play-in his 6 weeks with the team. I don't see how he works with Luka Doncic. There's rumors Dallas wants him. There was that weird rumor that Dallas wanted to see if they could somehow get LeBron from the Lakers, which of course was not going to happen. I still think there's going to be some way Kyrie Irving finds his way to the Lakers. I think he'll be willing to take a discount because he's wanted to play with LeBron James for now several years at this point and have a reunion. And the Lakers are close. And I think Irving with the Lakers would not be as nearly as much of an issue as Russell Westbrook was, because at least when LeBron is struggling or LeBron is hurt, Kyrie Irving can score. Kyrie Irving's an elite scorer. Russell Westbrook is not an elite scorer. I think Kyrie could fit with the Lakers. And personally, I think that's where he's going to end up if he doesn't re-sign with Dallas. I think it's more likely he's with the Lakers than the Mavs. What say you?
I mean, I honestly can't think of a team that's willing to go get him besides the Lakers, if we're being completely honest with you. You talk about with Dallas really messed it up. I mean, they gave away all their best defense, which kind of what was keeping them in. Luka Doncic is already a liability on defense. You add Kyrie Irving to that. It just doesn't work out. And you talk about Kyrie, he's realized now that I've only ever won and been successful with LeBron. And that was because Kyrie's realized, he can't take the lion's share of the blame. He wants to be the number 2 guy. Remember, he always wanted to be the number 1. He got what he wanted in Boston, completely failed. He went to Brooklyn trying to, Kevin Durant is not really a leader. He might be the best player on the team, but we both know he's not a leader, locker room guy. You go to the Lakers with LeBron James, who, is the ultimate locker room guy. Anthony Davis also probably has a very well-respected voice there. And, yeah, he's a complete upgrade over Russell Westbrook because, as you talk about, he can score the basketball more consistently than Russell Westbrook. Also, just his IQ in general. Kyrie Irving can make himself useful when he doesn't have the basketball. Russell Westbrook, you see, doesn't have any off-ball movement. He kind of just stands in the corner. So, and you talk about the Lakers are very close. They got swept by the Nuggets, but at the end of the day, the Nuggets pretty much ran through everyone in the postseason, if we're being completely honest. And you get Kyrie Irving, and now all of a sudden you can get more. You can make your lineup deeper. You can move Austin Reeves to the bench. He's probably going to get a nice deal. He's given you really nice minutes. Lonnie Walker, a guy you can also now continue to bring him off the bench. Just more depth because you're going to need a lot of depth with LeBron getting older. I mean, and obviously he's going to have the foot surgery. But to be completely honest, I mean, where else would Kyrie Irving go? If we're being completely honest, I can't really think of, unless a team like the Magic want to, or, you know, like a team that's not contending, just want to throw a ton of money at him and sign him. I can't really see where else he goes.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's go to James Harden now. So the Sixers are in a weird spot because you got a new coach coming in. Tobias Harris clearly doesn't want to be there. They made the horrible mistake of paying Tobias Harris and not Jimmy Butler a few years ago, and then just didn't use Tobias Harris the way he's supposed to be used. And they just pretty much just banked him in the corner, and that's pretty much all he did. Harris is someone who used to drive the basket and score 18 to 20 points a game when he was with Orlando and Detroit. I'm not saying he can still do that, but I think he's more effective in other systems, and I don't think he's going to be back with the Sixers. I just don't see James Harden leaving. We could get a big surprise. NBA free agency is very unpredictable, but I just don't see the Rockets wanting to bring in James Harden, because if they do, what was this last 3 years for? Honestly, you get 3 picks that are wings or guards that you're trying to develop. If you bring in James Harden, that kind of ends all of that progress you were making, because then they lose the opportunity to make progress. And then what was the rebuild even for in the first place? So I think James Harden's going to be back with the Sixers. What do you think?
I agree, because also you gave me the fact Houston, the Rockets have got some good talent with them. Jalen Green, Jabari Smith. Do you want to bring James Harden, who is possibly the worst role model? You want to bring him in to that system? And maybe he does want to go to Houston. Maybe he just wants to take the money and leave, because Sixers fans are fine if he leaves with the way they played. But he has shown he can be useful, because remember, in Philadelphia, yeah, people forget, talk about the Game 7 flameout, but he also won them games 1 and 4 single-handedly by dropping 40 points. So he can still summon it up on occasions. He can still summon up that MVP James Harden. And if you're playing with a consistently healthy Joel Embiid, he's a more than willing passer. We've seen it. He's led the league in assists since being in Philly. Now, obviously, he got Doc. Well, I'm not going to say he got, but they pretty much got Doc Rivers fired, because he was like, I don't want to, we don't want to have Doc coach. So now you're going to have a different coach who hopefully will make adjustments, because Doc Rivers doesn't make any adjustments whatsoever. So yeah, I think Philly really is the only move. He's kind of backed himself into a corner here because no one else wants him. I mean, Phoenix is definitely not going after him now that they've traded for Bradley Beal. That was the only other place I could see him working out with. But yeah, for me, if he wants to go back to the Rockets and take his money and retire, I mean, so be it. But I think Philly, if he wants to win a championship and also get decently paid, Philadelphia is really the only option for him.
Let's talk the Bucks now. So they are in a weird spot this offseason. So you've got Chris Middleton, who opted out of his deal, and he's a restricted free agent. Then you got Brook Lopez, who, I mean, this is the guy who once was he still is the all-time leading scorer for the Nets and was pretty much just like a traditional center. Then he became an elite 3-point shooter. And now this year, he's one of the best defensive players in the league. So he's recreated himself like 3 times. And I think he's going to be very desired on the market. I'm so impressed with him because, I mean, he's 36 years old and he's reinvented himself as a center throughout his career to become more of a valuable piece, and it's changed as the game has changed. So Brook Lopez, to me, really impresses me, and there's a lot of teams that are definitely going to be interested in him. And Chris Middleton, contributor as well, instrumental in the Bucks winning the championship 2 years ago. So which of those guys, of those two, do the Bucks keep? Do they lose them both? What do you see happening with Milwaukee here over these next few weeks?
That's actually a really tough one. You asked this question 2 years ago, the obvious option is Chris Middleton. But I mean, there were a good amount of games where Giannis wasn't in, where Brook Lopez led the team in scoring. Like he'd drop 25. I honestly think it has to be Brook Lopez, and that's no knock on Chris Middleton. But are you willing to pay the guy after? So they win the championship. The next year he goes and gets injured in the first round against the Chicago Bulls. Then they lose to the Boston Celtics in 7 games. And then this year he was injured most of the time. So, and just wasn't right come postseason time. So are you willing to pay the guy more money? Yes, he's done and obviously he was instrumental in the championship run, but he hasn't stayed healthy for the last few years. Brook Lopez has been far more reliable, and if we're talking about being on the court. So I honestly think the option is to keep Brook Lopez because Chris Middleton, now that he's opting out, is going to want a lot of money. And I just don't think Milwaukee's going to be willing to pay him that much for a guy ever since winning the championship just hasn't stayed healthy enough, and it has cost them in the postseason.
It has. It definitely has. And I don't really know what the strategy is for the Bucks because it's such a tough Eastern Conference because Boston's good. Miami doesn't matter who's on their roster, they're good. And Philly's going to be competitive well. And you've got some young teams on the rise as well. But at this point, I agree with you. I'd value Brook Lopez more than Chris Middleton. And I think Chris Middleton could fit in some other systems. I could see Chris Middleton in the Western Conference as a big time shooter for a team. Absolutely. Let's finish with this. Let's finish with your Knicks. So rumors came out yesterday that the Knicks are interested in Bruce Brown, which I think Bruce Brown is going to be coveted in the market. I think he's going to drive a high price because of how well he played during the NBA Finals. He has really improved his game from when he was with the Nets. He was so good for the Nuggets all year long. He can guard 1 to 4. He can defend. He can get you a bucket when you need it. He can crash the boards. So Bruce Brown to the Knicks, would you like that? And what else would you like to see the Knicks maybe do this offseason? Because they're close. They had a promising postseason. They won a series against Cleveland that a lot of people thought the Cavs would have their number. And then they went and contended with Miami at least a little bit. What do you see the Knicks doing here and building around Jalen Brunson?
Bruce Brown would be a great move when we're talking off the bench. We talk about the minutes he played in the Nuggets. And Eddie, you know, as a Nets fan, he was the best player in that series, even though he got swept against Boston. He was your best player. He played better than Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So he's really reinvented his game. The only issue I have with him is he can't shoot. The Knicks need shooters. If you're the Knicks, go get Van Fleet.
I mean, Fred Van Fleet, I think, is a excellent piece, and Rahill is dying there for us. Yeah. Unlike Rahill right now, Fred Van Fleet does not choke under the pressure. He is a elite shooter, and he played so well when the Raptors won their title a few years ago. My thing, though, is the size, because if you got Van Fleet and Jalen Brunson both on the team at the same time, those are two very tiny guys to have on the court at the same time. And
I mean, but you need the shooting, man. You saw the Knicks shooting in the postseason. It was the one thing that cost them. They couldn't break over 100 points consistently.
That's true.
You got to go get him. I know the size is an issue, but you got Mitchell Robinson down low, who really came into his own against the Cavs. He was the reason they won that series, the way he dominated the offensive boards. And you still got size if you keep Randall. He's still a big guy, so size to me is fine. You just need a knockdown 3-point shooter at this rate, and a guy who can deliver in the clutch. Because guys like Josh Hart, Bruce Brown, they're not going to be able to knock down threes consistently in the big moments, even though Bruce Brown was huge in the finals.
Yeah, and then the one thing, the Knicks already have a great defense. Bruce Brown will help that, but they have a lot there. So it's not like they necessarily need to make that move right now. Well, that'll just about do it here for Sports Speak episode 140. We appreciate Rahill Jaiswal joining us and coughing along the way. A reminder, we have a website now, sports-speak.com. We're going to have some articles up, brought some other things into the Sports Speak umbrella, so you can always check out more content there. Always follow us on Twitter. And a reminder, Sports Speak powered by SeatGeek, $20 off your first purchase with the promo code SportsSpeak. Thanks to Rahill for joining us and Tim for earlier. For them, I'm Eddie Kalegi signing off here on SportsSpeak. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.